Tom Albanese, thanks for joining us.
Good to see you here today.
The Treasurer, Wayne Swan, says the government is proposing generous transition periods for existing projects. They seem to be mostly worried about existing projects and that they are part of the consultation process. So aren't you getting a bit ahead of yourself here, since that consultation process is still ongoing?
Yeah, well, Tony, before I answer that question, I want to do a few gestures first. And when you see them, you'll have to admit they're pretty neat. They were taught to me by a public speaking consultant. And it's kind of like magic. When you do them, no one listens to a word you're actually saying, which is lucky when you're like me, being paid $10 million a year to bullshit. When I do them, people can see I'm a genuine guy, and you Aussies are such suckers for honesty, and that's for sure. Yo, check this shit out, motherfuckers. I'm going to do the steering wheel, and I'm going to follow it up with the puppy. Hey, don't run away, little fella. I'm just getting started. I do believe it is the responsibility of all Australians to get the best possible return for their resources, not just for themselves, but for future generations as well. Because once they're gone, they're gone. And a profits-based tax is the best way to do it. When the price of commodities go up, we'll share some of the extra profit with the Australian people who own them.
You claim the super profits tax is the #1 sovereign risk that Rio Tinto faces anywhere in the world. What is that sovereign risk exactly?
Okay, well, sovereign risk is usually applied to countries and refers to the risk that they won't be able to pay back the borrowings that they've got. We're using the term here because it sounds scary and thought it might be useful in a scare campaign right here in Australia. Bada boom, bada bang. Essentially, with the royalties system, we paid a flat rate for the right to mine and sell your minerals. And now your country is coming along and saying the value of your minerals to the rest of the world has increased and you want a fair share of the returns from them. Now, ignore the fact that I'm paid $10 million to say this, and believe me when I tell you the sovereign risk in Australia is worse than Zimbabwe or Mongolia, Madagascar, or any other crazy country where we also have mines.
You're saying you're not happy with the actual process of consultations being put forward, are you? Because one could argue that why don't you sit down quietly with the government without all the public grandstanding and deal with this face-to-face before this becomes a massive public debate?
Now, okay, now watch the hands here, especially because, you know, if I was really talking to you and you know, opening my heart to you, then I'd actually say, you know, hey, if I was in your society, I wouldn't, you know, sell off the crown jewels for nothing too. So we cannot have an honest debate about this, because then we can't use emotional advertising to convince the Australian people that it's a bad thing that the Chinese government, our biggest shareholder, gets less and they get more. Whoa, I didn't say that. I did not say that. Watch my hands. Watch my hands. Watch my hands. Very important you watch my hands, not listen to what I say.
Are you worried that other countries might look at what the Australian government is doing and decide that this is a good template for extracting more money from miners for their countries as well? Is that part of the problem here?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's always a chance other countries will follow a good idea, but forget that and watch me lift you up with my hands. Now, my friends and I, we don't live in normal society. You know, we live behind high walls, security guards, we have cleaners and chefs, and we're only really interested in keeping the money flowing to us. We're kind of like in a wealthy elite gang.
But the theory of this tax is to give the Australian people, who after all own the minerals, a higher share of the profits when the profits go up. Is that a reasonable template for a tax? Because a lot of economists are now suggesting that it is.
Well, yeah, I guess you could, you know, we got to admit that the resources are owned by the Australian people. But, you know, without us, this country would have been in a total recession. We saved this country. Without us, this country would be down the tubes. I mean, you know, okay, forget the fact that we're only employing 1.6% of the workforce and that we're only accounting for 6% of the GDP, and that if everyone had sacked people like us during the recession, there'd be 19% unemployment across the board in Australia. And just remember that you owe us and we saved you.
But are you prepared, because it's going to be a key element of the consultations, are you prepared to pay any more tax on the higher profits that you make?
Okay, look, if you think it's okay to charge us more money for your resources simply on the basis that, you know, they're worth more now, then, you know, like, frankly, we might just take our bat and ball, and if we had one, we'd go home. And then where would we be? We'd have to leave some of the resource in the ground for future generations. You know, other people benefiting. How would that be, huh? You know, and the labour shortage might abate, and you know, you might have to cut back on your record immigration, and the housing shortage might go away, and rents might come down. I mean, how would you like that? You gotta think about it, Australia. You know, over the last decade, our snouts have got so goddamn big off of this country that there's just no more room in the trough. Oops, I think I've got an oil leak.
But you have told shareholders you're planning for 15 years of growth in demand from China for all these minerals. That will be followed by an upsurge, by your own predictions, of growth in India. So if the demand is not going to go away, as you seem to be telling your shareholders, why would you expect it to go away just because your profit margin is somewhat lower?
Oh, Tony, you got to understand, nobody wheels and deals like us over here in the mining industry. You know, not a day goes by without a multitude of deals coming on the table and off the table. You know, but what you got to understand is that if we want to, we can take our money out of Australia and use it to bribe foreign officials in other countries where there's less sovereign risk, as we recently did in China and BHP recently did in Cambodia. Stern who? But I can assure you, going forward, there is not a single deal that fails to get up that we will not blame on the Australian people asking us to share some of these windfall gains. Well, Tom Albanese, your naked self-interest obviously precludes you from speaking with any integrity. It sure does. And on behalf of the Australian people, I'd like to say if you're incapable of making a profit on the basis that you might be asked to share some more of it, then off you go. Make room for some younger entrepreneurs who can.